Welcome to the Transformative Pathways Podcast with your host, Jason Doby. Join Jason as he explores the many ways to unlock personal growth, mindfulness, and spiritual transformation. So now, please welcome the host of Transformative Pathways, Jason Doby.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Jason Doby, founder of Transformative Pathways Life Coaching. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today, we'll be discussing meditation myths and how to develop a consistent practice with our guest, Abbey Morris, who is joining us today from St. Catharines, Ontario. Abbey is an Ayurvedic yoga specialist, meditation and mindfulness instructor, and certified sound healer. With a deep passion for holistic healing, she integrates yoga, meditation, and sound healing to support others in finding balance, self-compassion, and inner peace. Through her programs, events, and retreats, Abbey shares these powerful modalities to help others reconnect with themselves and cultivate an overall well-being. Abbey, welcome to the show, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here.
Awesome. All right. So to start things off, Abbey, could you share a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Abbey, of course. I live here in St. Catharines and I have a yoga and meditation studio here, or I like to more so refer to it as a boutique wellness studio because we have a lot of things happening here. I run regular public classes that combine the modalities of yoga, pranayama or breath techniques, meditation, and sound healing, as well as collaborating with many different healers and teachers to offer various holistic events in the space. I also work one-to-one with folks through these various modalities for all different reasons, whether it's more physical, mental, spiritual. And I have recently, in the past few years, gotten into hosting retreats, both locally and internationally, where we have the opportunity to really immerse ourselves in the yogic lifestyle. And how I got to where I am today and sort of my journey with meditation is from my own journey with mental health and more specifically healing from a severe eating disorder. I came across and started practicing meditation through my yoga practice. As many people who become very involved in yoga begin their journey, I was drawn to the practice for more of the physical aspects, but it was more of the mental and spiritual aspects that sort of kept me very involved in the practice of yoga. And I quickly started to acknowledge the changes and shifts that the practice of yoga was having on my own perception of myself and the world around me. And I wanted to go a little bit deeper. At the time that I was really struggling with my mental health and with an eating disorder, I worked at a yoga studio as a receptionist, and I would practice very, very often and had the opportunity to become friends with a lot of the teachers and the other staff that were working at the studio. And it was a very safe and supportive space for me. And I quickly began to realize that it was so much more than the physical aspects of the practice that made me feel so safe and at home on my yoga mat. And eventually I decided to take on my own yoga teacher training and had the opportunity to travel to many different places now to practice and learn how to teach yoga and then meditation and diving deeper into the practices of Ayurveda, sort of the lifestyle science of yoga. And it totally changed my life. So the first time that I practiced meditation, or I'd say that the first introduction I really had to meditation was Shavasana at the end of a yoga practice, that moment of just being and stillness and being with yourself. It's not always comfortable to be, left alone with your own thoughts. And I found this really powerful and at first very intimidating. So as I continued my yoga practice and was introduced to formal styles of meditation, it was quite a journey, not just working to create more space and silence in my mind, but also becoming aware of what was consuming my mind, and became very interested and fascinated at just how powerful our mind is. And through the practice of meditation was really able to acknowledge, that I am not my thoughts. And this was a very powerful realization for me and really inspired me to teach yoga not just on the physical level, but very much so beyond the postures, helping others to realize that they have the ability to become the observer, the witness of their own mind, and actually get to choose how they respond to life rather than just react. So it's been a very powerful journey for myself with these various modalities, and now I have the pleasure of sharing that with other people. And to be able to open people's eyes or minds to these sorts of ideas and giving them a different way of seeing themselves in the world around me is extremely fulfilling. And it's, yeah, something that I just thoroughly enjoy.
That's beautiful, Abby. What a story. And, I discovered meditation kind of similar to you, through my own mental health problems I was dealing with, mainly stress and anxiety. But that's what got me started on my path 12 years ago or so when I first got sober. And, I needed to find a way to deal with all these emotions and feelings I was having, because I used to just bury them with drugs and alcohol and all that stuff. And yeah, so this is one of my favorite topics to talk about. And I'm so excited that you agreed to do this today. Um, I think meditation is one of the most powerful practices out there. So I've been an advocate to kind of spread awareness about meditation myself for the past couple of years. As you know, when I started the mindfulness meditation group in Niagara a couple of years ago, and we actually had you as a guest one night when we did that sound healing meditation, which was amazing. And that's where Abby and I connected almost about a year ago now. My first question, Abby, Ayurvedic yoga. I've never heard of that before. I had to actually look that up today. Could you explain a little bit what that is and what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Ayurveda is the lifestyle or medical side of yoga. So, similar to yoga, it derives from the ancient texts or the collection of texts called the Vedas. And it is really intertwined with the practice of yoga. If yoga speaks more to the spiritual and mental development of a person, Ayurveda uses the tools and techniques of yoga to help work with the mental aspect of our health, which, as maybe many of us listening to this podcast are aware, the mind body connection is very powerful, and our mental health has a drastic impact on our physical health. And the reason that I really dove into the practices of Ayurveda is because throughout my journey recovering from my eating disorder, I developed some really serious digestive issues that totally controlled my life. And there was a point when I was really struggling with my mental health and with my eating disorder that I had an emergency surgery on my bowels. And after that, life was really never the same. And I felt really helpless. I felt really afraid of my body. I didn't feel like I had control. And it really dictated how I lived my life. So after, becoming very frustrated with the Western medical system and not receiving answers and still consistently being sick, I dove a little bit deeper into the practices of Ayurveda that I was introduced to in my yoga teacher trainings. And so Ayurveda really is a holistic health system. It's the oldest holistic health system in the world still practiced today.
Wow.
And like I said, it's intertwined with yoga. So meditation and the practices of yoga are very much a facet or a part of Ayurveda that we use not only to work with the physical body and our physical health, but again, also our mental health. And as a holistic science, acknowledging that very strong connection between our mental health and our physical health, and more specifically in my own life, the correlation between our mental health and our digestive health. Because in yoga and Ayurveda, we see digestion as not just what we take in physically, like food and drink, but all of life's experiences. We have to digest all of life's experiences, and meditation has a very significant role in that, and being able to, you know, have the discernment and the right judgment to choose for ourselves wisely, whether that is what we're putting into our bodies, whether that's how we're choosing to spend our time and energy, whether that is how we respond and interact with the world around us, whether that's in our relationships with others, with ourselves, or, you know, with the environment around us.
I love that. That's beautiful. And I think it's really important to point out how important it is, how much of an effect our mental health has on our physical health, like you were saying. And I think a lot of people don't really know that, because that's not something that we were really taught growing up. And that's something that I've really been diving into recently too. And I haven't been sick in over a year. And I you know, just mentally tell myself all the time, I don't get sick. You know, there was a time when I used to think I was doomed and I was going to get cancer because everyone in my family got cancer. And I used to think, you know, I'm going to get cancer no matter what. And, you know, my mindset has totally shifted on that since I've learned the power of our mind and how it correlates to our physical well-being. So I think that's a really important point to bring up. Yeah. Well, I want to dive into some of these meditation myths, because I think a lot of people need to hear this. So, what would you say are the most common myths about meditation practice? I guess we could start from there.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk about this because I just 2 days ago at an event that I had here, I had a woman, you know, explicitly share one of these myths. And I was like, oh, I can't wait to talk about this on the podcast.
Yeah.
But I would say that the number one myth that I hear, like if I had $1 for every time I heard this as a yoga and meditation teacher, I would be an extremely rich woman. But many people will say, you know, I can't meditate, or meditation isn't for me because I just can't turn off my brain, or I can't seem to silence my thoughts. And there is, you know, the idea there that to have a successful meditation practice, or to meditate at all, you have to completely silence your mind. And I think that is so funny because, you know, I will respond to that with like, well, are you too dirty to have a shower? You know, like that sounds ridiculous, but that really, meditation is to help us create greater space in the mind and
Mhm.
greater awareness of the mind. And so if you're finding your mind, you know, constantly consumed with thoughts, or, you know, constantly telling you stories, then that's the perfect reason to meditate. So it's so important to acknowledge that meditation is a practice. And if we could so easily just turn the mind off and silence it, then maybe we wouldn't need to practice meditation so much. But it very much is the practice that will help you to create space in your mind. And so it's really important. And whenever I'm teaching meditation, I always remind my students that every time you bring your mind back to your meditation practice, whether you are focusing on a mantra, whether you're focusing on your breath, whether you're doing a guided meditation recording, every time you notice, oh, my mind has wandered off and I'm thinking about, you know, this random thing, and you decide to refocus yourself, it's like doing a little bicep curl for that mindfulness muscle in your brain. And the other piece of this that I like to share with students is that meditation isn't just about silencing the mind. It is also about becoming aware of what is consuming the mind. because this is what's going to help you silence the mind or create more space in the mind, or be able to, acknowledge the thoughts that are coming in and discern for yourself whether that is a truth for me that I'm going to, acknowledge and work with and carry with me, or if that's nonsense that my mind is telling me. It is so powerful to even meditate and acknowledge that our mind is always telling us stories. It's always telling us stories. And some of these stories are, inspiring and positive, and some of them are terrifying and absolutely untrue or have no factual evidence towards them. So to be able to sit there and just witness how your mind is working gives you so much insight into, what is consuming you, into what limiting beliefs you're holding on to. And these are the sorts of things that subconsciously control how we're responding and reacting to the world around us. And when we can become aware of some of these things, we can do the work of, choosing for ourselves what we believe and rewriting our own narrative. When I started practicing meditation, and even still to this day, every day is different. Sometimes my mind is extremely active, and it is so helpful to just be aware of, okay, what is my mind, consumed with today? And, working with those thoughts, whether they're thoughts of inadequacy, whether they're thoughts about, how other people are perceiving me, whether they're thoughts about, my productivity. It is insight into, what is consuming me and how can I work with this? And are these stories that I'm telling myself true? Or can I decide for myself, yeah, no, that's not what I believe, and refocus my intention or refocus, my thoughts to be of a more positive nature? Because the way that we speak to ourselves is so important. We have trillions of cells in our body that are constantly listening to every thought, everything that we say to ourselves. And we simply cannot shift what we're not aware of. So it's okay if the mind is busy in meditation, and it doesn't mean that your practice is inadequate or that you failed in some way. You are simply on a journey of self discovery, and becoming aware of what the mind is saying is only going to bring you closer to that sense of freedom and that sense of mastery of the mind, where you get to choose, what is true for you and what isn't.
I love that. That's beautiful. And that's so true. I hear that from a lot of people all the time too. I can't meditate. My mind's too busy. And
Mhm.
I'm a guy that has a really, really busy mind, maybe busier than the average person. So, I can totally relate to that too. And I've been meditating for a long time. And I just want to say that, I've noticed lately, and I was just thinking, when I do meditations in the evening, more so like in the morning, I meditate when I first wake up in the morning, and my mind's pretty calm at that point. But when I do it in the evening, I just realize is when my mind is super busy. And I find that sometimes when I sit down to meditate, that's when all these thoughts come in about work. Oh, you forgot to do this, or you got to send this email, or you got to do that. And yeah, so the mind never stops. And I love what you said about how meditation gives us the awareness for our thoughts and our feelings too. Um, because if we're not aware of our thoughts, then, we're not really in charge of our life and what's going on. So to me, that's a really, really important point, and that has been really beneficial for me. If you want to change the way you talk to yourself and change the way you think about yourself, then you first need to be aware of how you're speaking to yourself in your mind, and meditation is the best way to bring on that awareness, for sure. And so, what do you say to those people that say they're too busy, or they can't meditate? Like, how do you get that person to try meditation? Like, what's your advice to those people, or for people like me that are trying to help other people?
Mhm. I think that, even just giving them that permission that, hey, you can meditate, and if thoughts come in, that's okay. Or if you sit to meditate and you notice your mind wanders off and you're like, oh, like I'm thinking about this, I'm not even meditating, like what's the point of this, acknowledging that that doesn't make your practice any less valuable than if you sat there with a completely empty mind. Um, I think that just giving that permission can be extremely helpful. And also sharing that, like, hey, been meditating for years and I still have thoughts come in and out of my mind, and that's okay. Um, I also think that it's very valuable to give people the permission to try different styles of meditation, because sometimes people will, maybe find an app or recording on YouTube or something, and they give it a try, and they find their mind really busy and they go, oh, this must not be for me. But there are many styles of meditation, and it's okay if they don't all resonate with you, because we're all different and all of our minds work in different ways. We all have different needs. So to be able to explore various styles of meditation is a wonderful thing, because you get to, find something that truly resonates and works for you. And a good example of this is if you are someone with a really hyperactive mind. And I think a lot of people are drawn to meditation because they have a very hyperactive mind. Then styles of meditation that have a focal point can be very helpful. And by a focal point, I mean a mantra. A mantra is a word or a phrase that we repeat, usually in coordination with the breath. And it's almost like an anchor, bringing you back to the present moment, keeping you in that centered place in your meditation. And it gives you something to focus on. It gives the mind something to do. So, for example, a very simple mantra that is quite popular in mantra meditation is So Hum, meaning I am awareness, or I am that, or I like to think of it as translating to I am here now. And for if you were using this mantra as you're sitting and meditating, you would think to yourself as you breathe in, so, and as you breathe out, hum. And you do that over and over. And it's not necessarily, it's nice to have a mantra that has a nice meaning to it, because we want to repeat positive things to ourselves. But the most important part of that mantra is the idea of the focal point, bringing yourself back and back to that focal point. Um, However, it doesn't have to be a mantra. It could simply be your breath, continuously focusing on the inhalation and the exhalation. And I find that technique, or any technique that has a focal point, very helpful for people that find their mind wanders really easy, because, like I said, it gives the mind something to do.
I love that. Thank you for those examples. And, for myself, I used to do a lot of focus on the breath. I guess when I first started meditating, I would do kind of guided meditations to kind of help me stay focused. And then now I don't really like guided meditations. I like to do my silent meditations. And I used to always I would just say in my head, uh, breathing in, I know I'm breathing in, and then breathing out, I know I'm breathing out with the breath. And then that turned into just in and out. And it just,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like you said, you're focusing on your breath or the part of your body, and you're saying that thing in and out. And then when your mind wanders and you notice it, instead of being discouraged, that's a win. You noticed your mind's wandering, you're being mindful, and now you come back, like, yay, and then just keep on going. um I was going to say something else there, but I forget. Oh yes, a lot of people, I think, get caught up in this thing of like, oh, I had a good meditation today, or oh, I had a bad meditation today. um I'm curious, what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, there's no such thing, is my thought on that. There is no such thing as a bad meditation practice, because even you carving out that little space of your day and coming to sit or lay down or however you're choosing to meditate, that's already a win, because that is very challenging alone. And I think a lot of people would agree with that. But the act of just attempting the practice in itself is already a win. You're already being mindful. You already have the intention of creating space in your mind, of becoming aware of what is coming in and out of the mind. And every day is different. We're always going to go through periods of our lives where the mind is a little bit more active, or we have things in the background in our lives that are difficult to not think about. And then we might have days where we're feeling a little bit more centered, we're feeling a little bit more relaxed, and the meditation practice feels easier. I think there's, this misconception that the more that I practice, the easier it should be. And if it's not getting easier, then I'm doing something wrong. And sure, as you continue to practice meditation, you might find it a little bit easier or less intimidating to sit and practice, but your life is shifting and changing and you're going through different things all of the time. So it's completely natural that your mind is going to be more active at certain points of your life than others. And like we talked about, when the mind wanders and you bring your awareness back to the present moment, back to the focal point, back to your meditation practice, that is where the magic is. That is where you're building that awareness of, oh yeah, my mind has wandered off. I'm not in the present moment. I'm thinking about this, that, and something else. And bringing yourself back, that translates off and out of your practice into your life. Maybe you're out in the world having a conversation with someone and you notice your mind is like wandering away and you're not really focused on what they're saying. And when you notice that and you bring yourself back, that is part of your meditation practice. And that is, a beautiful byproduct or side effect of meditation. It's just becoming aware, of your mind wandering and bringing that awareness back. And so there's really no such thing as a good or bad meditation. And, you might have a meditation practice where your mind feels a little bit more still. And if it's a meditation practice where the mind is not still, you have the opportunity to become aware of, okay, well, what's consuming my mind today? Let's just look at this. Why is my mind, so active today? What kinds of things are really getting at me? Is it that I have a lot to do? Is there something that is bothering me inside? Is there, something that I can do to help soothe myself in this day? It's all information. And I think that, that gives us the opportunity to care for ourselves differently rather than, oh, my mind is so busy. How can I distract myself or push this stuff away or, numb myself to it? It's very brave to sit in your meditation practice and have a busy mind and to continue going and to know that it's okay if my mind is busy because I am gaining personal insight into what my mind is up to, what it's saying, and how it's functioning today.
I love that. So there is no such thing as a good or bad meditation practice for everyone out there listening. I love that. That's beautiful. And I've definitely noticed that myself in having conversations with people and I've caught myself, oh, I'm not like paying attention or I'm thinking about this. So I definitely can relate to what you're saying there for sure. What other sort of meditation myths do you encounter with your clients?
I think another one that is, very relatable and universal and is a really easy excuse for the mind to use to not meditate is, I don't have enough time to meditate. Um, that's huge, and there's, many things in our life that we might use the excuse, I don't have enough time. And yes, it's true. Life is very busy, especially in the world that we live in today. Our attention is being drawn in so many different directions all of the time. But, when you think of how long you really need to meditate, and sure, you can have a longer meditation practice and that will take up a little bit more time. But consistent meditators that practice for even 5 to 10 minutes a day notice a difference in their mind within 2 weeks. And when you think of all of the things that you do in a day for 5 minutes, you could probably take away from something else that you're doing in your life to practice meditation if it really is something you want to do. For example, wake up 5 minutes earlier. Notice how long you spend scrolling on your phone and and looking at social media. Notice, how you fill these little pockets of your day, and ask yourself, like, where could I fit in 5 minutes? Because it doesn't have to be long, especially at the beginning. Because if we task ourselves with, we want to start a meditation practice and we say, okay, now I'm going to wake up every day and meditate for an hour before I go to work. Well, that is a very daunting task and a very shocking habit to just throw into your routine, taking a whole hour. But if you bring this practice into your life gradually, you will eventually be able to create more space for it without feeling like it's a big task that you have to make time for in your day. So when people are starting meditation, I'll suggest to them, like, hey, I know you're really excited about this and you really want to get into it, but why don't we start with just 1 to 2 minutes? If it feels really daunting and really scary to sit with your thoughts, 30 seconds. Or we have this practice that's been passed on to me from my own Ayurvedic teacher of just taking pause and stopping in your day to take 10 slow, deep breaths. And that is a segue to your meditation practice. You're stopping, you're being mindful of your breath, you're guiding your awareness inwards. And it could even be helpful to set a little timer on your phone for when you're going to have a pocket of time that you could make that happen for you. Maybe it's on your lunch hour. Maybe it's after work in your car before you transition home to, meet your family or whomever is there, or whatever you're doing next. But it doesn't have to be long. And my, suggestion or rule for folks is always consistency over intensity. So if you could get in 30 seconds of mindfulness each morning for the next 2 weeks and it goes well, then add another 30 seconds or add another minute and build it up like that, so that it doesn't feel like, oh my gosh, now I have to wake up and meditate for half an hour tomorrow. How am I going to create time for that? Because you're likely not going to stick with it if you give yourself such a drastic shift to your current life, especially if you're trying to incorporate this into a part of your day that, you have a lot of things to do. Like in the mornings, you might be taking care of kids. You might be, making sure that everything is taken care of at your home before you leave for work. You might have to make sure that you have like your lunch packed and all of these other things. But if you can start small and keep it consistent, you'll be able to grow the practice a lot more naturally in your life, rather than feeling like, oh, this is too daunting, I'm just gonna, forget it.
I love that. That's beautiful. So hear that, everyone? You just need to start with 30 seconds or even a minute a day for 2 weeks, and you're going to notice a difference. And I think everyone could fit that into their schedule. I know personally for myself, I remember when I committed a few years ago, like I've meditated frequently, but it would be like I would meditate before work, but I never meditated on my days off. And it was kind of to help me deal with stress and anxiety. So it was always related to my work. It's something I did every day before I went to work. And then I decided I wanted to expand my practice to 7 days a week. And a few years ago, I set a goal that I was going to meditate every day, get up in the morning and meditate every day. And sitting meditation. And I had a hard time sitting. So what I would do was I just started for 5 minutes. And I would sit for 5 minutes. And if I wanted my meditation to go longer, I would do like a half and half. I'd sit for a little bit and then I would lie down for the other half. And then I just kind of build up from there. But I wanted to ask you, for people just getting started, like, do you recommend sitting or lying down or sitting in a chair? What's your recommendation with that?
I would say that, what's most important is that you're comfortable. So everybody has different needs in their body. If you are introducing yourself to the practice of meditation and it is literally painful to sit with no support to your back, or to sit on the floor, then, start somewhere else. I think that, sitting in a chair with support for your back, if that's something that's more comfortable for you, or against a wall, can be a really lovely place to start. Meditating lying down is also a wonderful option. However, if you're someone that finds that you easily fall asleep, then it might be better to start with a seated practice, unless, of course, you're using the meditation practice to relax yourself for sleep at night, or to fall asleep, because there are certainly a lot of sleep-focused meditations out there as well. So I usually suggest to people that, if you're someone that easily dozes off into sleep, and the purpose of your meditation isn't to go to sleep, then start in a seated position. But how that seated position looks is personal to you and what you need to be comfortable. I do think it's important to be able to sit with, a nice straight spine, because even energetically, when we're sitting up tall with our shoulders relaxed, there's a sense of alertness while still being relaxed in the body. Whereas, and if you're listening to this, you can even try this in your body, when you sort of slouch over and your shoulders are rounded and, the back is really rounded, there is sort of like a heavier energy to that too. And it might even be a little bit more difficult to focus. So when we sit up nice and tall, we have this nice clear channel from our mind all the way down our body. And that's, going maybe into more of like the subtle aspects of energy and the chakras. But when we're sitting up with the spine sort of erect, where we find that sense of alertness, and I feel it as like greater clarity of mind, because it's like my mind is open, I'm sitting up tall, the energy can flow harmoniously through my being. Whereas when you're sort of slouched over and you feel that sense of like lethargy, and you might find it a little bit more difficult to focus.
Beautiful. Yeah, I always wondered about that because everyone says to sit up when you meditate to have your back straight, but I always wondered, because when you're lying down, your back's straight as well. And I can meditate lying down for I don't know. I haven't tried to go super long, but I used to practice that a lot when I did my anxiety meditation. So luckily, I can meditate lying down for a long time without falling asleep. And one thing I notice when I do my sitting meditation in the morning, and then before I go to bed, and also before you go to bed is a great time to take 5 minutes because you're already lying down. It's a great way to unwind for the day, and quiet your mind before you go to sleep. So I don't think anyone can use the excuse that they don't have time when they're already lying down in bed, and you could just take a couple of minutes there. But one thing I just noticed is I find that in the evening when I'm lying down, my meditations go a lot deeper. I can get a lot deeper, but maybe that's because I'm so comfortable and relaxed, and I get in that relaxation state. I'm not sure about that. Interesting, Abby. Anyways, moving on to the meditation myths. Is there any more meditation myths that you wanted to touch on today? Those are probably the top two, eh?
Yeah, those are definitely the top two. Um, I also find that, people are so focused on this idea of like emptying the mind. Um, but as we talked about before, becoming aware of what your mind is saying to you is a really powerful thing. So I find that even, how people think of and define meditation can be sort of a myth in itself, because there are aspects of, changing that relationship that you have with yourself. And a little bit of science of meditation here is that they've been able to see, now that we have all of this fancy technology in recent years, through brain scans, that meditation, or inconsistent meditators, they see that the practice of meditation and mindfulness actually helps to reduce gray matter density in the brain, or works to shift gray matter in the brain. And gray matter is the substance that lives in the central nervous system, and creates most of the neuronal cell bodies. So it's an essential tissue in the brain and the spinal cord, and it's particularly relevant to our muscle control, our sensory perception, our emotion, our memory, our decision making, and our self-control, or our ability to be discerning. So it's really important to acknowledge that you're not just working to, silence the mind. You're actually changing. You're physically changing the shape of your brain, but you are creating new neural pathways so that your mind can think differently. So the benefits of meditation expand so much further than just, um, you know, having moments of peace, to literally shifting the way that your mind thinks, and what your automatic response to things are. Um, and for me, the biggest part of this is acknowledging that I am not my mind and I am not my thoughts. Um, that is the most powerful takeaway from my own meditation practices, is realizing that if I am the one who is having a thought and I can witness that thought, like, oh, here I am thinking about ice cream, then I can't be that thought if I'm the one who's able to witness it. And this provides such a great deal of freedom, because we realize that not everything our mind is telling us is true. And we don't have to listen to everything the mind is saying or accept everything the mind is saying is true. So when we have those, intrusive or self-limiting thoughts come in, we can go, okay, I'm not my thoughts. I am the one observing this thought of inadequacy, or this thought of I'm not good enough. And check in with ourselves. Well, is this really what I believe about myself? Is this true for me? And we get to decide. Whereas for me, before I started meditating, I believed everything my mind told me. I would have negative thoughts and it would really get me down, and I didn't know how to handle it. I just wanted to push them away and wanted to distract myself from them or numb myself from them. But through the practice of meditation and realizing that we are not our thoughts, we get to put ourselves in the place of that observer and go, okay, interesting. My mind is telling me that I'm not good enough. Okay, how can I work with this? Let me dive deeper into this thought. Where is this thought coming from? And we can really reveal a lot of patterns of thinking that we have and shift them into something more positive. Or through that realization, be able to work with that thought. And whether it's through self-reflection, whether it's through talk therapy, whether it's through just talking with a trusted friend, get to the source of, why do I think of myself in this way? Where does this thought come from? Maybe it's from a past experience from my childhood. Maybe it's from, some relationships that I had growing up. Maybe it's from, a past experience that had a big impact on me, that, gave me sort of this limiting belief. In yoga, we call these samskaras, and they are imprints on our subconscious that, from a subconscious level, sort of dictate how we react with and how we interact with the world around us. And so to be able to acknowledge something like that and work through it so that you can change your own narrative and how you're speaking to yourself will change literally your life. Like the way that you interact with yourself, the way that you interact with people out in the world, the way that you interact with your day to day and what you have to do. Um, it's so powerful, and it's so much more than just, creating that 5, 10, 15 minutes of quiet in the mind. You can really rework the way that you speak to yourself and the way that your mind thinks.
Absolutely. Yeah. That is so powerful. Um, yeah, we are not our thoughts. We are the observer. That is, yeah, I can definitely relate to that. Everything you said there, I'm just like, yep. I'm living proof for that. Just thinking about myself and where I used to be and where I am now, and I had no idea about that dark matter thing, but I can totally feel that inside of me. Like, days where I'm meditating, I definitely notice, sometimes I go through little pockets where I get really, I'm going to use the excuse where I get really busy. And I do have a lot going on right now. And I just went through a time for 3 months where I was doing this course and I, started this podcast and I had so much stuff going on. Then I had my full-time job too. So I'm working from like 6 in the morning until 12 o'clock at night sometimes. And I put my meditation practice, I kind of put it on the side. Um, and there's a little bit more to this story too, which I won't get into, but I guess I can get into a little bit. I read autobiography of a yogi about a year ago, and after that book, I felt really drawn to the Kriya Yoga, and so I'm like, what is this Kriya Yoga? I want to learn what this is, and I couldn't, and I searched around, and no one was really teaching it. So then I got the idea in the back of the book, you can become a self-realization fellowship student. So I sent in an application and I became a student, and that was like 10 months ago. So for the last 10 months, I just went through like my basic training. And then now I qualify for the Kriya Yoga teachings, but I don't qualify because the last 3 months I kind of stopped my practice. And I think because, and this is interesting too, because I went from meditating every day for years and years and years, and then I started learning these new modalities, and I had to spend more time. I had to invest more time into it, and it was difficult learning new things, and I really struggled, and it was, then I'm questioning myself, like, why am I struggling? I've been meditating for so long, but I get all hard on myself, but I'm learning something new. So that's a little bit of the background there, but to spend 45 minutes to an hour in the morning meditating that I didn't have, I just didn't do it. And I noticed a huge downfall in my mental health a little bit. And now I'm back on track. And as you were saying that, I can totally feel the clarity in my head now, compared to that time when I fell off. But I think I got so scared or intimidated that I didn't have the full time to do it, that I just didn't do it. But I should have just stuck with it and said, okay, I only have 15 minutes today. I'm just going to spend 15 minutes today and not worry about spending 45 minutes or an hour. So that was something that I've been struggling with. And I feel like I just kind of started over because I can't qualify for the Kriya Yoga teachings until I've done these techniques for 6 months or something. And it's pretty strict. You have to do it every day, twice a day. And I have a lot going on, and I have 3 kids, and I don't have time to necessarily do the full thing. So I had to kind of tell myself that maybe now's not the right time of my life to do that. I'm still on the path. I'm not giving up. I'm not quitting, but I just need to keep with it. And, when the time of my life comes when I have more time to dedicate to it, then I will go deeper into it. And, yeah, so I don't know what my question was there, but yeah, so it was really discouraging, and it was almost like as my spiritual practice or as my meditation practice um, as it got more advanced, I had more obstacles, and my ego was getting louder, and all this stuff. So it was very, very interesting. I wonder if you could speak to that at all, if you have any words of wisdom for me. I would really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I think that, with anything in our life that we dedicate a lot of time and energy towards, you know, it's very easy for that ego part of our psyche to, get attached to this idea that, if I've put in all this time and energy, then I have to be advanced at whatever this thing is. And if I don't see that result in my practice, then, what's wrong with me? Or, I'm not trying hard enough, or, I'm not as, advanced as I thought I was. Um, but it's so important to acknowledge, sort of like we talked about before, that we're going to go through these periods in our life that are more challenging and ones that, aren't as challenging. And I think the underlying sort of belief behind the myth of like when people say I don't have time to meditate, is this fear that if I take this time to meditate, I'm not going to be as productive in my day, or I'm not going to be able to get as many things done. Um, but like I'm sure you've realized through your own practice too, is that when we take that time to sit and, having compassion with ourselves that maybe it's not going to be 45 minutes every day. Maybe it's going to be 5 minutes someday. Maybe it's going to be 15 the other. Maybe it's only going to be 2 one day. But taking that time at all rather than not is so much more helpful and keeps the consistency going. And a lot of people will find, myself included, that by taking that time, even if it's short, we will find ourselves more productive throughout the day because we're able to enter whatever we're doing with maybe a little bit more clarity in our mind, or at least our nervous system is, a little bit more relaxed from where we maybe started when we came to sit in our practice. But, you certainly shouldn't get down on yourself about not being able to fully commit yourself to this sort of intensive experience at this current point in your life. Because, yeah, maybe at a time when there's less stuff going on, you'll be able to give your time and energy to it with more grace, and without feeling like you have to, fit it into all of the other things that you're doing. And I remind my students this often, coming to your mat or coming to sit in meditation, even if it's short, is better than not doing it at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Yeah, and another thing I wanted to say earlier, but I forgot, was when I get up in the morning to meditate, I remember it went from forcing myself to get up in the morning, like the alarm goes off, I use all my will to get up and get myself to go sit on the mat. But over time, I found that now I wake up in the morning and I'm like excited. I can't wait to go and sit down, because that's like my time throughout the day. That's my time where I get to sit with myself. So it's become like a sacred time for me. So it's just interesting. We were talking earlier about people just starting out for meditation. I remember how difficult it was to make myself do it, but over time you're gonna look forward to that time, because that's my time. That's my time before my kids wake up and before everything goes crazy in my day. That's my time where I get to sit and be at peace and be with myself. So I think that's really important. I just wanted to share that. Beautiful, Abby. Is there anything else that we wanted to touch on with regards to the meditation myths? Let me see here. I have a question. Yeah, I think a lot of people are maybe scared of meditation because they say they're not spiritual or whatever. They have this idea in their mind that if I meditate, then I don't know what the word, like some sort of stereotype or something. But do you have to? I guess what I'm trying to say is you don't have to be a spiritual person to meditate. Like you don't have to be a spiritual person to meditate.
No, absolutely not.
I think
And
I think for me, actually,
go ahead.
I became a spiritual person through my meditation practice, is what I've kind of discovered. But sorry. Is there any other myths that we left out, or anything else that you wanted to speak on for this topic?
Um, Well, I think, yeah, I'll speak a little bit to what you had just mentioned about this idea that you have to be a spiritual person to meditate, or if you meditate, that, means that you're a spiritual person.
Mhm.
And I even find that statement in itself like quite broad. Like what it means to be spiritual to one person could
Yeah.
mean something totally different to another person. But, you definitely don't have to consider yourself a spiritual person to meditate. You could simply just consider yourself someone who, wants to do better by themselves, and to acknowledge the importance of their mental health to their health and well-being in general. And I think we really see this with, in the past few years, like a lot of and people that we don't always look up to as spiritual. Of course, we don't know everything about all the celebrities out there, just what we hear in the media. But there has been, especially in this past Olympics, a lot more vulnerability in regards to, mental health, and the correlation between mental health and physical capability, and, physical health and well-being. So it, just like maybe exercise to maintain the health of your physical body, we meditate or practice mindfulness or self-reflection, work with the mind in any of these ways, to further improve our well-being. Um, it is like medicine for your mind. It doesn't have to be a spiritual practice. There are certainly ways to, connect more so with your spirituality through meditation, but you could also not have that spiritual connection, or that might not be your focus of the meditation practice. And that's okay. And it's a very personal journey. And I think that's why it's so beautiful that, so many different styles of meditation exist.
Beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. All right, Abby. Well, we're almost at the end of our time here. So before we wrap things up, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners? Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you'd like to add?
Yeah, totally. Um, I have a few, I'll share just a few little, tips, or I like to think of them as little gems, for when you're going to start your meditation practice, or if you're on this journey of, wanting to meditate, but you're intimidated or you're afraid. And, that first gem or tip is that we've already spoken about, is that, that you are not your thoughts. And meditation is an opportunity to acknowledge that you are the one witnessing your thoughts, and therefore you cannot be your thoughts. So when you're in meditation, become the observer of what your mind is saying, rather than, getting discouraged about what your mind is saying, if that makes sense. If the mind is telling you that this is dumb and it's a waste of time, just observe that, go, this is interesting. And that's, a little piece that I have found very helpful, is to literally say to myself, isn't it interesting that my mind, thinks this is a waste of time, or that my mind is telling me, that I should stop this and that I'm not good at it? Or, isn't it interesting that my mind is so fixated on, sending this email that I have to do after this practice, even though I'll be finished in about 15 minutes. Isn't it interesting that my mind is so fixated on this? Or isn't it interesting that my mind is so fixated on, this conversation that I had with this person, and how I feel they might think of me now? And create that space between your thoughts and you. Um, and that is a really beautiful way to give yourself that permission to not have to sit with an empty mind to be meditating. Um, the other piece of this is that when you're in meditation, it's helpful to view your thoughts as objects rather than who you are, and this goes for the emotions that come up too, observe them as an object, rather than, oh, this, feeling of anxiety. This is, why am I so anxious? What's wrong with me? Isn't it interesting that I feel this anxiety right now? Okay, what is that about? Um, Focusing on consistency rather than intensity in your practice. If you find it's really difficult to sit for 10 minutes in the morning, scale it back. Start with 2, start with 5. Give yourself that taste of accomplishment before you add more, so that it is inviting to come to your mat each morning, rather than something that feels like a chore, or something that you have to fit in, or something that feels inconvenient to your day. Just like any other habit, starting small and building your way up is a wonderful way to gain momentum, to, feel that sense of accomplishment, and to not overwhelm yourself. And you'll find that the more consistent you can be with that shorter practice, the easier it'll be to extend it by 1 minute, to extend it by 2 minutes, et cetera, et cetera. And that remembering that practicing mindfulness and meditation is a practice, and that if we were so able to just turn off our mind and empty our mind of thoughts, then maybe the practice wouldn't be needed as much. But the reason that the practice exists is to help us with our busy minds. So it's okay if you have a busy mind. And actually, as you meditate and talk to other people that meditate, you'll find that a lot of people who are drawn to meditation have a busy mind. And that's why they want to meditate, because they want to work with it. So it's okay that your mind is busy. It's actually a perfect place to start.
Beautiful. Awesome, Abbey. That was beautiful. And where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah. The easiest way to find me is probably on my website or through my social media. And my website is very simple. It's www.yogabyabby.com. And on Instagram, that's probably my most active social media. My username handle is abby.yogini.
Beautiful. That was so great, Abbey. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're so welcome.
Yeah, it was amazing. And for everyone listening, I'll include Abby's information in the show notes below if you'd like to connect with her. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can reach out to me on Instagram at transformative_pathways. And you can also find my link tree in the show notes below, where you'll have access to all my social media, my email list, and my private community, and options to book a consultation or apply to my one-on-one coaching programs. And if you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love it if you could subscribe and follow us on your favorite listening platforms. And if you like the show, we'd be so grateful if you could take a moment to leave a review. It would mean so much to us and also help the show reach more listeners. Thank you so much for being with us today, and we look forward to connecting with you again soon. Thanks so much, Abbey.
This has been the Transformative Pathways Podcast with your host, Jason Dobie. Tune in each week for more insights, inspiring stories, and transformative journeys. Until then, keep exploring the path to keep your best self. Saturdays, 3 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network, powered by B2 Studios.